So there's different kinds of breakups, right? There's the long breakup that just kind of takes for a while. It's like a, kind of like a wounded relationship walking on one leg that collapses. And then there's the I never saw it coming breakup. So let's just take a casual poll here. Put your answers in the chat. Which one do you think the narcissistic person is more likely to pull? The long breakup or the out of nowhere, I never saw it coming? Let's take a look at your answers down below, but let's talk about this. I mean, long breakups are rough, but you see them coming. So that never saw it coming, that's a whole different animal. So again, putting the question out to you that if you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship, have you ever been in a narcissistic relationship, and then you think it's fine, and then it seems like it just falls apart almost immediately. Like one day you come home and you think you're in a normal relationship. You're even thinking about how you're going to spend the holidays or where's vacation, and they say, hey, I want out. They might even be asking for a divorce or something. You might have literally thought, again, you guys were doing fine. Not perfect. I mean, it's a narcissistic relationship. You were probably doing most of the justifying and the heavy lifting. But to the world, and perhaps even to you, the relationship seemed fine. You might have done stuff together. You might have kids. You might do some things together, shared interests, whatever. At least the trains are running on time. Maybe in your narcissistic relationship, there weren't lots of fights and angst and agony. And believe it or not, this kind of relationship, it can happen with a narcissistic person. In fact, many of you might be saying, yeah, that was my experience. I mean, my narcissistic partner wasn't the easiest, but it wasn't sort of this big mess. You may have enough that you like about this person, even though they're narcissistic, that you're able to make it work fine. You may even believe you had a decent relationship, and just one day, poof, it goes up. Relationships have a life of their own, right? I view every relationship as involving three living entities: you, the other person, and the relationship itself. And obviously the two of you may go on living while the relationship slowly withers away and the life goes out of it. But as any living thing, a relationship, like any living thing, has a life history with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, in many relationships, as they fall apart and come to an end, the end of the relationship is not unanticipated. It just unfolds slowly. There's more arguments, there's more antipathy, maybe even more contempt. One or both of you stop caring, you check out, they check out. You may not care if they show up or not. A sort of indifference may creep in, or it just may be nonstop conflict. There may be breaches of trust. Whatever that long trail off to the relationship no longer working looks like, it ends up slowly losing its life force, and it ends. I'm not saying this is easy, and one person may be putting more work into the relationship working. But over time, it slowly fritters away. When it does end, you may not be happy, or the other person may not be happy, but you, and probably the world at large, understands it. Now, can this happen? This kind of slow death of a relationship happen with narcissistic partners? Sure. It may just be years of a slow death march forward, and then one day someone just cuts bait. And if it's you, you might be the one who gets up and leaves, but there still may be lots of post-separation abuse. If it's them, they may still be punitive, but again, it's not a surprise. This slow trailing end of a relationship is also what happens in what were once healthy relationships. Just the relationship slowly starts dying, and when it falls apart, yeah, there's some grief, but it's also like, okay, this thing needed to end. But that abrupt, I thought we had a decent relationship, and then one day they kind of come home and say, we're done. That, more often than not, is a narcissistic person's play. Like literally, they can go from what feels like a happy relationship and pop right into a new person, into a new life, whatever that means, all while it's seeming like it was fine with you, and you're left holding the bag and feeling insane. Then you might start taking out your phone and your calendar and saying, okay, wait, what day did this change on? We went to dinner last weekend. We had sex 10 days ago. They were posting some loved up stuff about me on social media 3 days ago. Like you start feeling like a character in one of those serial killer movies where the detective has diagrams and pictures and strings on the wall trying to figure out what happened. Where did it all go wrong? Then, of course, sadly, a lot of people will go to, was it me? You go back over those text messages that leave you feeling more insane, because they may very well have been saying things like how much they love you and lots of babe and XOXO and that kind of thing. You dig and you turn and you keep trying to find the moment, the smoking gun, the penny drop. Nothing makes sense. And then, because this is a narcissistic relationship, you literally start to feel insane. What did I miss? What is wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. For someone to turn off a switch like that, it's them. How can they do this? Well, first, usually the reason why the switch just turns off for a narcissistic person is because they found new supply. It's a bad feeling, but it's a big truth. New supply brings them something new and shiny. More often than not, it's a new person. It could be someone younger, richer, more famous, more successful. I was reading this past week about some person who left a wife and baby for some flossy pop star and just sort of unceremoniously dumped the wife and kid. I mean, I'm kind of curious what the over-under is on the new relationship. My bet goes that this new relationship with the flossy pop star is only going to last about 6 months. It takes about that long for the novelty to wear off and for the shame to set in. But the narcissistic person is often grandiose enough to believe that their life is some sort of exciting novel with them as the main character, a once-in-a-lifetime love story built into it, so when new supply shows up, they get lost in that BS. Narcissistic people are also status-seeking in everything they do, so if someone new can bring status, then they're going to jump for that as well. Interestingly, narcissistic folks are also quite suggestible. So if someone is dangling riches or opportunities or something they want, but are implying that their current relationship is a drag, the narcissistic person may also be willing to trade the person they're in a relationship with in to make themselves look better. A second thing to keep in mind is how superficial narcissistic people view relationships. Narcissistic folks don't go deep. So walking away from a relationship for them is really not a heavy lift for them. If you have ever planted something really shallow, like in a garden or something, you know that just one heavy rain will wash away your seedlings. It's kind of the same thing here. They just don't go deep. You may go deep, but they don't. So there is little emotional resistance there. Maybe they might feel a little bit of shame of what would people say if they get up and leave a family. But in the supply shame math, the supply for a narcissistic person is more important than the shame. And the shame will ultimately lead them to probably blame you for the breakup, which helps them feel a little bit better about it. A third thing to keep in mind is that, sadly, a lot of narcissistic folks just don't care. They pretend to care, and they can perform that for a long time, but their I love you is sort of the way other people say hello or goodbye. It's filler. The words I love you, mean such different things to different people, so they kind of become throwaway words for a narcissist. For you, they may feel very real. That does mean that, again, new supply will beat out their so-called loving you, and ultimately supply is the driver for the narcissistic person. So it's not really about caring about you, because they're kind of done with your supply. That's not an indictment of your supply. You're much more than your narcissistic supply, obviously, but it's an indictment of a relationship in which another human being is being viewed as supply. A fourth thing to keep in mind is that narcissistic people actually believe their own narratives. Grandiose and distorted as it is, it's almost delusional. They believe it. They believe the story about this is their journey and this is their destiny and they have to honor their path, or whatever drivel they are making up to rationalize blowing up a lot of people's lives. In this twisted narrative, there's little regard for your pain or confusion or hurt, or they may throw you under the bus. You may not have seen them for who they are, is what they might say, or they might say you didn't love them enough, or they might say things like you were going in 2 different directions, even though it wasn't the case 2 weeks before, right? Or my favorite manipulation is that ultimately this breakup will be good for you too, so you can grow. Ironically, in that manipulation, there's some truth. Ultimately, you'll be much better without this relationship. But the narcissistic person is often a salesperson and a con, and will try to sell you on the idea that ultimately their betrayal was good for you. So that's sort of a double ouch. It's very painful when someone who just days before was proclaiming their love for you can turn on a dime, and it hurts and it sucks and it feels like abandonment, because it kind of is. Yes, ultimately, one of these relationships ending could be good for you, but it's a long, painful, and shocking road to get there. But always, always, please understand, this isn't you. To them, everybody is replaceable, and that is related to their malformed sense of self, not yours. The long breakup is a very different kind of grief, when a relationship slowly dies on the vine, and there's much more working through, but it does also make more sense. And it can happen in a deep, sustained, and healthy relationship, but that sort of here today, gone tomorrow, that's much more the signature move that we see in a narcissistic relationship. So if it's ever happened to you where you're scrambling through and saying, how did we go from I love you, you're the love of my life, have the best birthday ever, baby, to you want to end the relationship? Again, you don't plant a tree deep, the first swift wind is going to knock it down. Hope that's helpful, and thanks again.